try to turn on the video. There we go.
Okay.
Hey! Hi,
Hello.
Phyllis. Thank you
Hello.
so much for being here. Phyllis is the CEO, founder and CEO of CONEXION. And I'll let you share a little bit more about the amazing work that you do. But I do want to kick it off with what we said at the beginning. It's not the Latinas are not smart. They don't have, the ability to get to the top. In a lot of cases, we don't have the resources, we don't have, the ability to know how to get there. And I
Right.
know that that's a lot of what your mission is, not only personally but through Conexion. But I imagine that there's also a story to tell on how you got there, because getting there and smiling is the final it's the photo moment, but the journey has a
Yeah.
lot to say. So would love to hear from you.
So we'll just briefly, I'll start by saying a little bit about how Conexion came into existence in 2005, which seems like 100 years ago, although it's only been about not quite 20 years ago. I'm originally from Omaha, Nebraska. I'm the daughter of Mexican immigrants. So I'm very much in touch with and very proud of my Mexican immigrant roots. Our family is like many of your families, came with very little. And we were fortunate in that I had a grandmother who was determined. It's in my remarks later in response to one of the questions that you gave me. But for her, failure was not an option. And early on, when they came from Mexico to Nebraska, of all places, my father hated it. It was cold. They were working in agriculture and then in the packing industry. He wanted to go back to Mexico. And my grandmother said, no, we came here for a reason and we're not leaving until we achieve our goals. So for her, I always say she was the first one to talk about failure is not an option. She had that North Star. So all of these terms that we use today, she lived those things. She was really focused on making a better life for her family. And by the way, I would like to say that in Omaha, Nebraska, I think Omaha, Nebraska became a better place because my father was there. He also helped many Mexican and Cuban. There was a fairly growing Cuban community in Omaha at that time as well. Uh, Many people, when he passed away, came to his funeral saying how much my father had done to help them come to the United States. So your first speaker, Ileana, is like, oh my God, I have to follow this woman. Oh my God, she's amazing. I agree with everything she said. But the idea of, not only asking for what you need, but being willing to also help others, I think is really a very important part of what we do. And especially now more than ever, it's necessary that we're aware of each other and the needs that our community has. So for me, Conexion came about, again, my own story way back then, of a family that came with nothing except the clothes on their back, really, and then was able to achieve, quote unquote, the American dream. Uh, we never forgot where we came from. My father made it very clear we would take trips to Mexico and take side trips to the villages. And I remember once as a 9-year-old meeting a little boy who was 14 who was my size. And I would say to my dad, I said, he's my size and he's 14. And he said, that's because he doesn't have good food to eat. So as a nine, that was a long time ago when I was 9. I never forgot that. And my father said, I want you to remember where you came from. And the idea of it wasn't enough that we had good food to eat and toys to play with and all the good things, but that instilling in us at a young age that was really incumbent on us, that we were fortunate, but that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. You really had to do more for those who maybe weren't as lucky as we had been. So fast forward to the 2000s, I had been working in Washington. I'd been a deputy assistant secretary in the Department of Education, traveled all over the United States, traveled outside the United States on behalf of the department, speaking on education at that time, and saw sadly that across the United States that there was not equity in terms of quality of education around the country for our community in particular and for poor communities in general. And I thought this isn't right. And did what we did while I was in Washington to try to make it better for everyone. When I came back to Boston, to restart my career here, I realized that we were nowhere better off than when I had left 5 years prior. And so I'm one of these people that, this is one of those call to actions. If you see something that you think isn't right, either stop complaining or do something. And so we chose to do something, which was to launch a leadership program called CONEXION. And we did that on purpose because we know that access changes everything. That, as your prior speaker said, it's really about those connections. It's about having the right people in your orbit that really can help you and you can help them. So we decided that we were going to focus on Hispanic, Latino mid-careers, and we were focused on getting to the corner office. And the reason being for two things. One is to being socioeconomically comfortable so that we didn't have to worry about having a roof over our head or food on the table. I mean, this is one of my campaigns is we have to stop assuming that just because you're well off, and that's why I like your prior speaker, wealth is not a bad thing. It's how you deploy those resources. And so we're really trying to help people get to the corner office and be in a position of influence and to really be able to change the rules and make it a more equitable world. So CONEXION is focused on that, and we work with companies to try to help their people advance in their own careers and have an impact. So we launched CONEXION. We employ mentoring. Our mentors are predominantly, again, if you look at the leadership in the United States, it's mostly men at the C-suite and mostly Anglo. And so fortunately, there are people out there who are allies who are willing to mentor our mentees who are, you have to be of Latin heritage, a quarter, a half, 100%. About 60% or more of our participants are immigrants, people from outside the US. And our mentors are people who are lifelong learners who love to mentor. And as one gentleman said, I mentored half the bankers in this city. I've never mentored a Latino. And he said, if you still want me, I'll do it. And I said, well, I'm going to fix that for you. So since then, he's mentored about 5 times over the 15, 20 years that he's been involved. So that's why we put CONEXION together, is to try to create parity, to create access, to put our community in positions of influence across sectors. We're agnostic by sector. So environmental, whatever it might be, but we have people in leadership across all sectors. So I'll stop there in terms of how CONEXION came into existence. And we have over
Thank
300 mentors. So anytime you want to enroll, let us know.
Thank you, and please connect with Phyllis and CONEXION because you're right. Although we're trying to continue to build a system through United Latinas of bridging the gap of great Latinas, like you, like Ileana, like the rest of the speakers that we're going to have today, and many of the speakers that we've had in the past, so that our members are able to have those connections, those chats. Sometimes it just takes a 15-minute conversation that can literally change your life forever. There might not be that the only opportunity. So CONEXION is one of those many other options to do that. But one thing, as a coach, one thing that I hear very often from Latinas and from other people in general is, I know I need to have mentors. I've heard it now time and time again. I know I need to have sponsors, but how do I go about it? And if I don't have access to CONEXION, or if I don't have, like, just in my day-to-day, in my workspace, like, how do it feels weird to just tap onto somebody's shoulder or knock on somebody's door or send somebody an email to say, hey, do you want to be my mentor? And that in a way stops us from moving forward, right? So what are your tips? What do you invite people to do? What do you recommend all of our audience here on how to go about that mentorship, and more importantly, also that sponsorship?
Right. Well, first of all, sponsorship is a subset. I always see a subset of mentoring, and mentors and sponsors can be the same person, or they could be 2 different people. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But in terms of finding a mentor, and I'll come back to that in a moment. In terms of finding mentors, I always say to people, look around you. And one of the things that people sometimes forget is start with your own immediate network. A lot of times people don't realize that there's such a thing as peer-to-peer mentoring. Sometimes people don't realize, but that's a very legitimate, useful thing to create, is peer-to-peer mentoring. And that is called a bonding network. By that, we mean it's a group of people that have similar goals, similar values, similar interests, and so forth. And you can really help each other. And in CONEXION, a number of times mentors have recommended, we had somebody in Ohio of all places working in quality, and she said, nobody in my company is Latino. And then her mentor said, really, is that the case? She said, well, yeah, there's a few. So what he suggested to her, rather than waiting for the organization to do something, she went ahead and started inviting people to have coffee with her. So she found them in the company and started inviting 1 or 2 people to have coffee. And over time, she built this little network of, 3 other people besides herself that they could meet on a regular basis to have coffee and just kind of affirm each other, because it was a very, very white organization. No criticism of the organization per se, but as a Latina, and she is an immigrant, and of course, like many individuals, she was worried about, quote unquote, her accent. And I said, well, that's something that I understand that you feel. I mean, my telling her that she's perfectly understandable isn't enough. It's how she felt. And so with her little group, they were able to get together, affirm and support each other. And it really made work and being in that organization a lot more tolerable, if you will, and it could lead to other actions that they might take that they wouldn't have thought of on their own. So number one is look around your own immediate network. Can you create your own little peer-to-peer mentoring? And that has real value. It opens you up to new networks because they belong to new networks. So that would be one thing I would certainly recommend. And then the second thing would be to take risks and go to events not unlike this one, both that are Latino focused and might be industry focused. And you might, and this is also something that people have done that works, is you might find one other friend that's willing to go with you and be your wingman or wing woman, as the case may be, and go to an event. And sometimes people ask me, can I go with you to an event? And I'll say, yes, you can go with me, because they want to know, how do you dive into a room full of people, especially if there are very few Latinos, if any, in this network that we might be going to. And they want to go with me and figure out, how do you talk to people that you don't know? And of course, as we all know, there's preparation you can do, create a short script. You interview them. What made you come to this event? What do you like about this event? Tell me more about yourself. All of those things that are conversation starters. But again, it's like breaking into a new network. Finding a mentor isn't going to be like, you're going to meet one person and then magically you're done. Unless you come to CONEXION, we match you. We do all the work for you, by the way. Ours is a formal program. And we do match, and we have a sticky program. About 87% stay connected after the program ends. If you're doing it on your own, give yourself a little bit of time and, consider going to things that you haven't gone to before. Take somebody with you. You don't have to go alone. If you meet somebody, say, is it okay if I, follow up? I'd love to talk to you further. Like you did with Ileana just now. You said to the group, some of them may in fact reach out to her. I sure as heck would. In fact, I probably will. I think she's fabulous. I mean, she's got some, I kept writing something. I said, damn, she's taking all of my notes. It's like, she talked about risk taking. Okay, scratch that. I mean, she talked about, I call it fail fast. She calls fail forward, but same thing. Don't take it personally. I say that all the time. Do not take it personally. So people don't want to talk to you. Don't take it personally. Maybe they're worried about something else and you just happen to come into their purview. So in terms of when you're networking, you've got to be willing to take some risks here around whether or not people are going to engage with you, but leading that to, because mentors are important, and I can say more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Phyllis, I know we have so many other things to talk about, what we need to keep moving along, but we really want to, I've dropped your LinkedIn on the chat so that we can continue to connect with each other. And if you have any questions for Phyllis, if you have any questions about CONEXION and how to, continue this path of bringing in mentors, of bringing in sponsors, or feeling how do you build that strategic network, please drop your questions on the chat. Phyllis, we thank you so much for being here with us today.